All right. Well, good evening. I am Dean Barlow, and I am thrilled to have the opportunity to chat with you all today as a part of graduate student orientation. John Scott's with us, and he will share a little bit. We'll talk a little bit about why he's here later in this episode. I'll call it our show. It's our stick, isn't it, John Scott? Like we've done this before, so it's old hat. So sincerely, I appreciate you all taking time out of your schedule to join me tonight. And I have the purpose of our session. Of course, there's a lot of different things that I could cover in this orientation. But I want to try to keep the focus on this idea that, a lot of us are coming out of undergraduate programs into graduate programs. And so we want to think about what are the big differences between undergraduate and graduate, paying particular attention to different policies and things that are related to being able to successfully complete your program. And our goal is really to go through those ideas and set you up for success as a graduate student, because ultimately we want to see you finish your program. So when I was thinking about the different things that I could talk about, I narrowed it down to what I'm calling the top 5 differences between undergraduate study and graduate study. I'm going to talk through some different scenarios that lead to these 5 differences. In addition, I have one tip that I think is really important for you as a new graduate student at UCA. And I have one note, so just a comment that I want to make. And then we're going to spend a little time talking about graduate student support. And that's where John Scott will come in and share his expertise. So to get us started, and my point in all this is awareness. So as we go through these differences, I'm using scenarios, and they're real scenarios. They are things that have happened since I arrived at UCA in 2017. I've changed the names, so I'm using pseudonyms, and in some ways I may have tweaked the circumstances, but they're all real cases. And sometimes it can be a little scary to hear this happened to somebody. But my point is not to scare you as a new graduate student, but instead to bring awareness, because with awareness brings knowledge, and knowledge is power. And then we know how to navigate graduate school. So with that said, let's get started. So to investigate the top 5 differences, I'll be going through 3 different graduate school scenarios. Each one I'll pose a question, and for a few of these I'll actually post it as a poll so that I can see what you all are thinking in regard to my question. The first scenario is labeled, or the question is, will she graduate? Okay, so here's my scenario. I'm just moving my picture out of the way. So the scenario is that Maria applied to graduate this semester. Her degree works audit. So degree works is our system for looking at here are the classes that you need to take for your degree. Here's, we're noting where you've taken all those classes, and it computes your GPA. So her degree works audit showed that her cumulative graduate GPA was a 2.552. and her graduate program GPA was above a 3.0. So the graduate program being the classes that are required for the degree, but then she must have taken some extra ones because she's got this overall graduate GPA of 2.552. And so the question is, will she graduate? Now, this is not what I'm asking for a poll, so just in your mind, think about whether you believe Maria would be able to graduate in this scenario. And now let's take a look. So the question is, will she graduate? The answer is actually no. So we want to talk about what's going on here. What can we do to prevent this scenario from happening? So what's going on here is at the graduate level at UCA, you must have a 3.0 overall GPA and a 3.0 major GPA. Now, most of you all are probably in your first graduate program at UCA. And as long as you stay on your degree plan, only taking classes that count towards your degree, then those 2 GPAs will be the same. But they start to differ when maybe you're in your second graduate degree at UCA, or if for some reason you take an extra class along the way, then those two GPAs differ. And that's what happened to Maria, is that although her classes for the degree were good, she had that 3.0, she had taken at least one class that was not a part of the degree, and it actually was hurting her GPA. And because she didn't meet this requirement, she wasn't allowed to graduate. So ways to avoid this scenario include not taking classes that are not on your degree plan, for one. Monitoring your major GPA. So make sure you're paying attention to both your overall graduate GPA and the major GPA. And then one other bullet point that I probably should have put on here, but I didn't think about it at the time when I was doing this. I actually was signing off probation and suspension letters yesterday. And what I realized is that there were several instances where a student would have Fs. And I swear, I'm betting that that student thought they withdrew from the classes and didn't. And then that resulted in Fs. So that's another bullet point I should add to this slide. And that is that make sure that if you're trying to withdraw from your classes, that that's actually being taken care of. And you can always call the graduate school to ask for help in that regard. So in terms of wrapping up this first scenario, this little piece over here that you have to have a 3.0 in your graduate overall GPA, as well as in your degree GPA, that is what I'm labeling as difference number one. So remember, I started off saying I'd have 5 key differences. This is the first one. All right, so second one. So here's our second grad school scenario. And the question starts off with, is this a possibility? And this one I will launch a poll. So I'll be curious to see what you all think. So Jamie started his master's program in 2010. He took 9 of the 10 classes he needed and then left school in 2012. So his must have been a 30-hour program, and he had completed 27 of those hours. And then for some reason, he had to leave school. So he decided 10 years later, so in 2022, to come back to graduate school at UCA, and he wants to take that last class and then graduate. So the question is this a possibility? So let me launch this poll. Okay. All right, so you should see the poll, and if you'll take a moment to answer my question, we've got options of yes, no, and then unsure. The votes are coming in. I'll give y'all a few more seconds. And where'd my cursor go? There it is. I will end the poll and share the results. So it looks like we've got a majority of folks are saying no. We have some optimistic people are saying yes. And then we've got some folks that are not sure, and it's okay to not be sure because that's why we're here tonight. So let's take a look at what happens here. So again, some time has passed and he wants to come in and take that last class. So is this a possibility? And the answer is no. So what's happening? So in that scenario for Jamie, basically Jamie had to just start over. And the reason being is that there are time limits associated with graduate degrees. So at UCA, a master's degree, you have 6 years to complete, an EDS is 6 years, and a doctorate is 10 years. And although those sound like really long time frames, it can happen that, you know, something is, you're going along, you're doing great, and then you step away for some reason, and then you come back and you realize, oh, my time has expired. And we talk about your clock or your time clock. So you have to be mindful of that clock and how, you know, where you are in completing your degree. This particular student, you know, the faculty member came to me and said, look, all of these classes have now expired, but could we possibly count maybe 2 of these? So I asked them to write up a justification for a couple of them. But basically, again, the student had to start over. So this piece over here is what I'm labeling as difference number 2. So of the 5, this is difference number 2, that we have to think about timelines. And we need to be paying attention to those, because once your time expires, you start losing classes. Okay. Grad school scenario number 3, is it possible for her to graduate? So here is my third one. And again, there'll be a poll for this one. So Fran is in a 30-hour master's program, and she's she's made B's in all of her classes except for one. And in that particular class, she had an incomplete and she never did the work. And so that incomplete turned into an F. And so the question is, based on that little bit of information, is it possible for her to graduate? So let me launch this poll because I want to see what y'all are thinking about. And you should see the poll now. And so if you'll take a second to enter either yes, so you think that it is possible for her to graduate. I mean, she's got all those B's and that's pretty good. No, you're thinking that she's not going to graduate for some reason, and then you might be unsure. I'll give y'all a couple more seconds. And I'll end the poll and share the results. So not quite as many people optimistic with this one for Fran. So we've got a large majority, 79% saying no, and then about an even split with the remaining folks saying either yes or they're not sure. So let's dig into this scenario with Fran a little bit. So these are her grades, right? So she's in a 10 classes are in the program. She's made B's all the way down, and then you see the F. And then over here to the right, her GPA on those 30 hours is 2.7. Obviously, for the class that she takes an F, she'll have to retake that and get a grade in that. So here is her GPA if she takes that class and gets an A, and then she takes another class and gets an A. So she's already taken 6 extra hours now, and you can see her GPA is a 2.9. So it's still not up to that 3.0 that we talked about earlier that she has to have to graduate. So in terms of the question, is it possible for her to graduate? The answer is no. And the reason for that is, well, she's got the incomplete that rolled to an F. We already knew that you had to have a 3.0 to graduate, but then here's the piece that we hadn't talked about yet, and that is that you have a maximum of 6 credit hours for improving your GPA. So when you looked at that list, you know, she had all the B's and the F, that 6 hours of A's was not enough to raise her GPA to the 3.0, and yet that's all you get, 6 extra hours. So to avoid this scenario, you know, you complete all your work on time. If you get an incomplete, and I mean, life happens, so that could happen. Just make sure that you stay on top of it and get that work submitted as soon as possible. And if you find yourself where you're not doing very well in the class, it is really better to just withdraw than to receive a bad grade. You know, when you're an undergraduate, you've got like 120 hours to play around with. If you have one F out of 120 hours, it's not going to impact your GPA that much. But one F in a 30-hour program, and a lot of you are master's students in a 30-hour program, that can really hurt you. And some of y'all may even be in like a graduate certificate program where maybe there's only 12 hours in the program. That F may be enough to like kick you out of the program. So be mindful of your work and withdraw rather than receive a bad grade. So in terms of my differences, this is the one that we want to pay attention to here. This is difference number 3, that if you get to the end of your program, you don't have that 3.0, the maximum number of extra classes you can take is 6 credit hours for the purpose of improving your GPA. Now, continuing this scenario with Fran. Fran wrote a letter to the graduate dean, so she wrote me a letter explaining that she had retaken the class in which she had received the F, and she requested that the grade forgiveness policy be applied so that she could graduate. Does the grade forgiveness policy apply in this scenario? So this, I'm not doing a poll for this, so just think in your head, do you think there's a grade forgiveness policy at the graduate level? And it turns out there's not. So in terms of what's going on here, you know, at the undergraduate level, there's often grade forgiveness policies, but we don't have that at the graduate level. That's why when I showed you Fran's grades, the F was still sitting there being factored into her GPA because it does not go away. We don't have that. And so then to avoid the scenario, all that same information or guidance I was offering a moment ago still applies. So in terms of our difference, we're up to difference number 4. This is an important one to be aware that there's no grade forgiveness at the graduate level. Okay. All right. So this is my last, I think this is the last part of this scenario. And I am going to do a poll on this one. So recognizing that there was no way for her to finish her degree, Fran decided to switch programs and pursue a different graduate degree. So the question is, can Fran switch programs? So let me launch this poll and we'll find out what y'all are thinking. So can Fran switch programs? We've got the answers of yes, no, and of course, unsure. So the yeses and nos are a little bit closer together this time, John Scott, and more unsures. All right, let me close this poll and I'll show y'all what I'm saying. So we see our yes and no's are a little bit closer than they've been being on the past questions, and our unsure people are a little bit more. All right, so let's check this out. So can Fran switch programs? So here's the deal. The answer is no, but here's what's important to think about. Why is that the case? So at the graduate level, there's no such thing as switching programs. So it's not like as an undergraduate, you can change your major. We don't change majors. We don't just switch programs. And so Fran's current graduate GPA will prevent her from meeting the admission requirements for any other program. I want to, and of course, to avoid this scenario, same old stuff I've been saying, right? I want to come back to this idea of switching programs and say it a little bit differently. So if for some reason you wanted to switch programs, then you have to actually apply to the new program. You'll have to submit whatever application materials that new program requires, and they'll review your application. But you have to meet all of those admission requirements. In Fran's case, she could apply, but her GPA is not going to meet the admission requirements. And so that is why it's not possible for her to switch programs, okay? So again, this is our difference number 5, and this is a really important one because number 1, students do think that they can just switch programs, and that's not the case. If you desire to be in a different program, you have to apply to that new program and be admitted. And then number 2, as a part of that admission, we do take a look at your current GPA. And so if your GPA was below the 3.0, you're not going to be eligible to start that new program. So those are my top 5 differences. And again, the idea here is these are different policies that students have bumped up against in the past few years of my work here at UCA. And so my hope is that by bringing awareness to these, that you will A, make informed decisions, and B, avoid some of these they're sad scenarios. It is a really hard conversation to have with a student about how they've done all this classwork and they cannot finish the degree. But to reassure you, we have lots of people graduate, like they are successful in their programs. In fact, like just last week, we awarded over 250 degrees for summer commencement. So, you know, while I've painted out 3 sad stories, there are 250 positive stories that just took place last week. So I want to, again, just reiterate this idea of awareness and how important that is for making very smart decisions so that we can support your success as a graduate student. So those were my 5 primary differences. Remember that I told you I had 1 tip and 1 note. So my 1 tip is DegreeWorks. Okay. Now I mentioned DegreeWorks earlier, and I told you that that's our system that we look at and think, okay, here's what's required for the degree. And we look at what you've done and we go, yep, they've earned their degree, let's award it. So you have access to DegreeWorks and you should be logging in, looking at it, asking questions. It has all the information you need in terms of what's required for your degree. In fact, if you go and talk to your faculty advisor and they start pulling out something on paper and handing it to you, you should say, no. Let's look in DegreeWorks because DegreeWorks is accurate. And sometimes papers that sit in a faculty member's filing cabinet for year after year may not be accurate anymore. So I want to just give you kind of an overview of what you'll find. in DegreeWorks. And again, I put it in red font to remind me that this is an important tip. Look in DegreeWorks. So here's what you'll expect when you get there. Oh, the rainbow wheel of death. That is not what you will see when you go into DegreeWorks. Oh, okay, come on. Just bear with me. Come on. This happened to me last night too, didn't it, John Scott? Probably at about the same moment.
Yeah, it came through though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you see the rainbow wheel of death?
No, I don't see. I just see your mouse, your cursor.
Oh, well, it's spinning. Okay, here we go. We're back in the game. All right. So let me back it up one. All right. So you start by going to My UCA. And once you get to My UCA, you can click on student roles and it'll show up, or you can do a search. Either way, you're looking for the button that says DegreeWorks Students. Click there and log in. You're going to then see something that looks like this. Now, if you got your undergraduate degree here, it's going to populate and show your undergraduate degree first. That for some reason is the default. And if it does that, you just go right up here to the top and you click on that drop down menu and you choose your master's or whatever graduate degree you're in. So this is, these are screenshots of what you would see when you go into DegreeWorks. It is dynamic, so you're able to click on things and menus pop up and so forth. I want to show you some of the key features to this. So one thing you'll notice is that it has your 2 GPAs. So this student has a 3.4 overall graduate GPA, but then they have a 2.666 as a part of their major GPA. So we know both of those need to be a 3.0. So this is a concern that I have for the student. You'll notice that there are several sections. The concentration section, we have something called fall through, insufficient, and over the limit. So I want to take a look at each of these different sections to just kind of orient you to what you would be getting when you go in DegreeWorks and look at your degree audit. This section where it's the degree in Master of Music, which is just this example I'm looking at, you can see the catalog year is indicated. It tells you how many credits are required in your program. For this particular student, you'll notice that it says 32 are required. They have 7. It tells them how many more needed. Also, like the residency requirement is listed here. So this is helpful information. In terms of their major, so their degree plan, more information is listed here. You can see, for example, that one of the requirements is that the student has at least 15 credit hours at the 6,000 level. So, you know, those are things that you may not know going into your degree program, but here it is. It's all spelled out for you. This particular program has several different proficiency exams required, and then they have a concentration. Okay, so let's see, what does the concentration require? So in the concentration, look, it tells you all the classes that you need. Like right over here, contemporary issues, that's the class that you need to take. It shows you if you've already had a class and what that grade was. In case of electives, right down here, it tells you all the different classes that are possibilities for electives. And the nice thing is you can actually click, if I were in DegreeWorks, but I'm not, this is a screenshot, you can actually click on the different courses and it gives you more information about those courses. So again, who needs a piece of paper given to them by a faculty member? It's all right here. And you know that this information is correct because this is what we'll be using in the graduate school when you finish your degree to make sure that you've done all the work you're supposed to. Now, there were other sections on here, so let's look at those real quick. Fall through. Fall through classes are those classes that for some reason are not being applied to the degree. So they fell through and they landed down here. If you were to look at something and fall through and go, gosh, I thought that was supposed to count. Like this particular student may be looking at that going, that voice class was supposed to count in my degree. Then you have a conversation with your advisor. Y'all can't expect your advisor to reach out to you and say, hey, look, you've got a class in fall through. Let's take care of that. You've got to look out for you. Look in fall through, you see something like that, talk to your advisor. If your advisor doesn't respond for some reason, reach out to us at the graduate school. We can do the course substitution forms or whatever we need to do to count that class if it was supposed to be counted. Another area we want to look at is, oh, I was doing so good, John Scott. Is that insufficient area. So y'all don't see it because I've got the rainbow wheel going right now, but insufficient means that the course was taken and the grade was not good. So either it's a D or an F, because D's and F's don't count in the degree plan. So for this particular student, remember I showed you their GPA and it was like a 2.6 something. That's why, because there's a class in there that they made an F in and it's impacting that major GPA. So that's insufficient. And then over the limit, and man, look at the over the limit classes. Oh, there they are. There's a lot of them in here, and over the limit means they're too old. So that's one reason. Look at all those A's. So that's one reason this student has a GPA overall, graduate GPA, that looks okay, but it's that F in the insufficient category. And if I can go back, I'll show you that now. Right there, there's that F. That's what's pulling her, his or her GPA down. So again, all this information is a part of your degree works audit. It is there. It is a tool for you so that you know exactly what's expected and exactly where you stand in terms of completing your degree requirements. If you haven't done it, you should make a point in the next day to go and log into DegreeWorks. So that was my one tip. Here's my one note. Graduate students withdraw because they fall behind, not because they can't do the work. So all of you were admitted to graduate study at UCA. That means that we believe that you can be successful. And research tells us that when students withdraw from graduate school, it's not because they cannot do the work. It's because they have too many things going on. They start falling behind in terms of getting the work done and meeting the timelines, and then they end up withdrawing. I sign all the withdrawal forms that graduate students submit, and I sign one or two every day. And every time it breaks my heart, because that is an instance where somebody has paid the money, started the class, and then something got in the way. So my note is to let you to know that, number one, it's not a bad thing to have to withdraw. It does not indicate that you can't do the work. So always know that withdrawal is an option and you need to keep up with those timelines. But number two, I share this note to say, let's jump out ahead of the curve. Make sure you are scheduling your time so that you are meeting all of your different deadlines so that you can show us that you are a successful graduate student by making the A's and B's that you need to complete your degree. And so with that, there's my red font to remind me that that's my important note. I'm going to turn this over to John Scott. So John Scott is our graduate student support GA, and he's going to tell you about his position. And then he also has some helpful information to share with you tonight. So John Scott, I've stopped sharing and it's now to you.
Thank you very much. So like Dr. Barlow was just saying, I'm going to give you a little bit of a background about what this position is, what I do. I want to talk about graduate student well-being in general, what things that we've been working on in that area. But then I want to go into a more specific area that really has to do with all graduate students, but particularly incoming students, and that's the imposter phenomenon. And again, is in the spirit of trying to gain awareness about this. And then at the end, I want to give you some avenues to get in touch with me when we can schedule meetings and exchange emails and that kind of thing. And I also want to go over some of the podcasts that Dr. Barlow's been doing on her podcast, Grad Chats with Dr. B. And I've been on there a few times, so I want to talk about those too, because part of it's going to be what I talk about tonight with the imposter phenomenon. So first, again, my name is John Scott Kelly, and I'm the Graduate Student Support GA. And this position was created a few years ago when I started the counseling psychology program. And it was really created to try to assist graduate students in any way possible. Like tonight, I'm going to be talking about well-being and mental health and those kinds of things, but it's really more general than that too. I'm really here to help you out any way I can. And the UCA Graduate School has really been trying to create some initiatives that try to boost mental health and well-being on campus. And part of that has to do with increasing awareness about some of these things, especially how they affect graduate students and how they affect these graduate students in particular in unique ways. So with that, I have a few polls of my own, and I'm curious what you think about this one. What percentage of graduate students reported experiencing stress-related problems that interfered with their academic performance and well-being? 5 to 15%, 15 to 25%, 25 to 35%, or 35 to 45%. And you can base this off of maybe your impression coming in, or maybe you've heard stories of other people. But what do you think the number is, the range?
So the votes are coming in, John Scott, and people are
Okay.
thinking about it in terms of the higher end of percentages rather than that low end.
They're thinking it's
So
stressful.
yeah, very
Okay.
stressful. So I'll give them a couple more seconds and
Okay.
I'll end the poll and share the results.
Yeah, all at the high end, nothing at the low end.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah. And then the 35 to 45 wins out. Yeah, it has the majority. And that's correct. 35 to 45%, so nearly half. And what's important about this statistic is that these are stress-related problems that actually interfered with academic performance. So it's more than feeling that the stress is unpleasant or just experiencing stress. It actually gets in the way of one of the main parts of graduate school that makes it so meaningful and that makes people want to be in graduate school, to increase academic success or to perform academically. So it's that plus the well-being that it's interfering with. So that 50%, almost 50% number becomes pretty significant at that point. It's actually interfering and becoming dysfunctional. So I have another poll. So for the second one, self-reports of anxiety and depression are blank among graduate students compared to the general population. 3 times lower, equally as high, 3 times higher, 6 times higher. And again, this can go off your ideas what graduate school is like, or maybe stories you've heard from other students.
Votes are coming in. I'll give folks a few more seconds. And I'll end the poll.
Okay, 3 times higher, the overwhelming majority there. Yeah, and it is higher, but it's actually 6 times higher, which is astounding to me. I mean, I know it can be anxiety provoking, and I know there's a high incidence of depression, but 6 times higher compared to the general population. I mean, that's a lot of anxiety and depression going on in graduate school in particular. So there's something going on here that's important to know about graduate school. So given this, it would probably be a good idea for universities, institutions to be doing some things like UCA is doing to try to address this. So what percentage of graduate institutions reported having a campus-wide plan, vision, or mission statement that specifically references the mental health and well-being of graduate students? 24%, 44%, 64%, or 84%?
So our votes are coming in, John Scott.
Okay.
A pretty bleak picture of our institutions in terms of addressing this. I'll give folks another couple of seconds and I'll end the poll.
Okay.
See what I mean?
Maybe my tone might have given it away a little bit, because yes, it is. It's 24%. And based on what I've researched, it tends to be that last bit at the end, that graduate students, that specifically references graduate students. That's the kicker here, because sometimes there might be a vague mission statement that has to do with mental health, or it might be more geared towards undergraduates. but it is it's right at a quarter of institutions have a mission statement specifically for graduate students. So it's a pretty low number. It is pretty bleak. So the UCA graduate school wants to be different and wants to be part of the trend that's going the other way. So we came up with this graduate school mental health mission statement. The UCA graduate school strives to create an academic community that values mental health in a manner that facilitates the success of graduate students. So that is really what we've been trying to do in the graduate school since this position was created. Really been doing a lot of different things, mental health related, well-being related, to try to increase academic performance, make this increase well-being, make this a fun part of your life, a meaningful part of life, and to try to take away from some of those really distressing numbers that were in the polls, the first couple polls. We've really been working on that. That's part of the reason why I'm here, is to try to increase awareness about a specific topic, hopefully being able to facilitate well-being and reduce the likelihood of this occurring in the future with more awareness. And this has to do with the imposter phenomenon. And you may have heard of the imposter phenomenon, also called the imposter syndrome sometimes. And what we've really been trying to do, what people are trying to do really in research, is to try to steer away from imposter syndrome, because that word syndrome makes it seem like it's some kind of mental illness or a medical condition. And it's none of those. It's actually very common, and the imposter phenomenon makes it sound just more like an experience rather than having that negative connotation. So that's what we've been trying to implement as well. And there are really three main factors associated with the imposter phenomenon. And the first one is probably what you think of if you are familiar with it. It's feeling like a fraud or an imposter. And this is really simply the sense of feeling like you don't belong or feeling underqualified for where you are. And sometimes people might say things to themselves that have to do with the imposter phenomenon. So it might be something like, I don't have what it takes to be here. Maybe you look around at other people in graduate school, maybe you look around your classroom and you feel like you are underqualified, or you feel like you don't belong or shouldn't be there. And so that would fall into that first category. And this tends to be the first thing that people experience when they're experiencing the imposter phenomenon. The second one is fearing discovery. So this is the sense that at any time someone's about to figure out that they're going to figure out your true identity, and they're going to figure out that you don't belong. And there's that fear associated with that, constantly being afraid that that moment can happen at any time. So example of this might be a thought like, if they knew who I really am, they would kick me out of the program. They would say that you don't belong here. I figured out who you are. I know your true identity now, and you don't belong here. And that tends to be the second thing that goes along with the imposter phenomenon. And the last one is an externalization of success rather than internalizing it. So like Dr. Barlow mentioned, you're here for a reason. People believe in you. You were admitted for a reason. But then there might be a tendency later on to say, well, maybe I got lucky on this assignment or something. Maybe it's because of someone else that I was able to get in. Maybe I shouldn't take the responsibility for that. Maybe I'm not the one who deserves the credit for that. And that would be externalizing success. You have this success, but then you attribute it to someone or something other than yourself. And this is what really keeps the cycle going. This tends to be the third thing that happens, and this takes it back to feeling like an imposter. So you can imagine what it'd be like if you got to that point, you were successful in something, but then you say, well, maybe it's because of luck. And then that kind of increases that sense of being an imposter, and then the cycle continues. So it might be saying something like, sure, it worked out this time, but that's just because I got lucky. I might not be so lucky next time. And that can be really detrimental. That kind of thinking really does become cyclical, and this pattern can really continue. So those are the main features. Those are really the major factors that are associated with the imposter phenomenon. But there are some other ones that may not be so easily recognizable, but are nonetheless associated with the imposter phenomenon. Those are high achieving attitude, for one, having high standards for oneself, procrastination or over preparation. Maybe you procrastinate because you don't feel like if it's too risky to put in all your effort. So you procrastinate and then wait till the end, and maybe you have that to lean on if it doesn't go so well. Other things like depression, anxiety, burnout, which I've talked about on podcasts, and then I've also talked about it in the GA orientation, and unsatisfactory relationships, which are incredibly important for well-being in graduate school. So as you might see, all those things really go along with graduate school. Graduate students have a high risk for having all of those, or any of them, or all of them, and so that makes graduate students vulnerable to the imposter phenomenon as well, because those can go together. So I'm curious about another thing. This is my last poll. Across professional settings, so this can be graduate school, work, what have you, prevalence rates of imposter syndrome, or the imposter phenomenon as we'll call it now, have been as high as 7%, 32%, 57%, 82%. Again, maybe based on your perceptions or stories you've heard, things like that.
So our votes are coming in.
Okay.
Giving folks a few more seconds. We've got some really optimistic people, or a couple of optimistic people that voted for low percentages. Let me go ahead and end the poll and share the results.
Okay. Yeah, 7s and 32s. So 57 majority. And it does actually turn out that it's as high as 82%.
Yeah.
So
wow.
What's really interesting about this too is that it usually feels like a very unique experience. Like if the feeling like an imposter, like part of the definition is that you feel like you are different, or an individual thinks that they are different from the group. But then it turns out that it's an incredibly common experience. And so what tends to happen, and I've seen this too and experienced it, is when people start talking about it, that other people are saying, "Oh yeah, me too," and that comment does a good job of illustrating that. Dr. Burlow gave me that. Credit to you. So I don't want to just give you that, like let you know about all that, and then not give you anything to work with that might be helpful in managing it. So I want to go over some protective strategies for the imposter phenomenon. And it might be helpful first to conceptualize what it is. It's really a discrepancy between you, yourself, and other people. There's this distance there, and it tends to be facilitated by focusing on negative attributes of yourself and then focusing on the positive attributes of other people to create more distance and that and lengthen that discrepancy or exaggerate it. So the idea would be to try to do things that reduce that discrepancy. So that'd be trying to look at yourself in a more contextualized way, and also look at others in a more contextualized way, because looking at it all negative or all positive are both rigid ways of looking at it. So the first one is contextualizing yourself. So like I mentioned earlier, and Dr. Barlow mentioned also, it really is important to recognize one's own expertise. So recognizing that you are here for a reason, that you were admitted with purpose, that people believe in you, and remembering that can help offset that sense that the negativity of that belief of you don't belong here, and that people are going to figure out that you are underqualified and things like that. It'd be really helpful just to remind yourself of that. And another thing that I think is really important, that tends to be difficult for graduate students, is self-compassion. And this just can be a way to give yourself some grace and forgiveness if something is particularly stressful, or you feel like you should have done something differently, just to take a second and give yourself a break, because there is a lot going on a lot of the time in graduate school. And then there are 3 main factors associated with this as well. The first one is what self-compassion sounds like. It's being kind to yourself, just self-kindness, saying nice things, treating yourself nicely, not saying bad things can be helpful too. And that might be the first thing that's thought of when you think of self-compassion. Then there are a couple other important ones too. The second one is called common humanity. And this is basically recognizing that your experiences are similar to others. In this case, it's important to recognize that one's suffering is part of the shared human experience. And this, again, is really important for the imposter phenomenon, because there does seem to be this sense that it's unique to you. And so this can be a way to feel more connected to other people. Maybe other people are feeling it like I do. Maybe I shouldn't be so hard on myself for feeling this way. Maybe I'm not so different. Maybe I'm not an imposter. And the last one is mindfulness. And I'm sure you've heard of mindfulness. UCI does all kinds of mindfulness series and activities, and we do it for Graduate Student Appreciation Week. But the main part of mindfulness that's helpful for self-compassion is adopting this accepting, non-judgmental attitude. And that's often part of mindfulness. Sometimes it's more implicit, but doing this explicitly can be really helpful, and just trying to get in that headspace when dealing with oneself can be really helpful in this regard. So the next part would be working on contextualizing your peers. So like I said, there's a tendency maybe to look at your peers in rigidly positive ways. The idea would be to try to contextualize that by engaging with them more often and seeing them as a whole person rather than that idea. So this also, it helps you feel more connected, which is an incredibly potent predictor of well-being in graduate school, but also can help you form a professional identity within your program, which is also really important. Both of those can really enhance a sense of stability, and that is so important for something that's as chaotic as the imposter phenomenon. Another really important thing that can be helpful is to have honest conversations with trusted individuals. And it's important to highlight that trusted part, because it needs to be someone that you feel like you can talk to openly and honestly. And that can be someone who's in your program. Maybe you have a good friend in the program. It can be someone outside the program as well. But it needs to be someone that you feel like you can really talk to about this and open up with and talk to it in detail. Because just like gaining awareness is important, going through all the details and hearing it, it's also important to express those too. And the last one, I think it's important to challenge this idea that there are these people who are just born knowing everything and didn't have to work, and they just came out being very professional and just like the top of their career or their trade. So I've been guilty of this too. I have people that I admire within psychology, and it seems like they just have done that their entire life. But if I think about it more, I realize that's not true. And everyone starts as a novice, and even pros had to grow from somewhere. The same is true for you. This is a chance to adopt a growth-oriented mindset. And that leads me into the more general idea that I think is really important for this. And that's to be process-oriented rather than perfection-oriented. So in graduate school, stakes are high. There can be this drive to be perfect, for there to be no mistakes, and to feel a lot of stress as a result of that. But it's important to recognize that growth refers to past, present, and future. So if you think about it in growth terms, if you look back to where you were before, where you are now, where you're going, it can take off some of that pressure to try to be perfect, because you weren't perfect in the past. You've gotten better since then, and you probably get better in the future too if you continue to work. And that can be a way to practice gratitude as well. A big part of gratitude is acknowledging what you have done in the past that got you to where you are now, and then what you have now that you're grateful for. So it can go along with that really nicely too. And then one other idea that might be helpful too is to see failure as a chance to grow. So failure, if you notice something that you wish had gone differently, that you had done better based on your own standards, maybe this is a chance to fix something about what you're doing to do better in the future, and learn something. I mean, graduate school is all about learning, and to learn something means you didn't know it before, and that's part of the growth process as well. The last thing I want to talk about is this UCA graduate student survey that we're conducting. And this is campus-wide, and we're really interested in hearing more about the graduate student experience so that we can try to create initiatives that will target what UCA graduate students need. And we're going to include a survey link in the follow-up email after orientation. And it's important to participate in this because, like I said, it's going to guide our future initiatives. They can be very helpful for you and just impactful for students on campus in general. If we get a lot of participation, we have a good idea of what the graduate student experience is like, and so we can have more accurate initiatives that we create. And you do have a chance to win some UCA swag, which I think is important, especially for incoming students. I mean, who doesn't need some more UCA swag, right? And then with this too, I want you to feel like you can contact me if you have any questions throughout this process. If it's a question about what it is, if it's before you're doing it and you have a question about it, if it's during or even after you have questions, feel free to contact me. And I want to give you some ways to contact me. You might be wondering how you do that. You can email me at gradsupport@uca.edu. You can email me if you want to just have an email exchange. If you have a question about anything, it doesn't have to be well-being related. I will try to answer it as best I can. And if I don't know how to answer it, I'll talk to Dr. Barlow or someone else who might be able to help me out with that. If you do want to schedule a meeting to talk about the stresses of graduate school and try to come up with strategies to help manage that, we can set up a Google Meet appointment and we can work with each other's schedule. And I'm sure you're busy, I'm busy too. We'll figure out a time that works best for both of us. And we'll try to get that scheduled and just talk for about 15 or 30 minutes. And I also encourage you to follow me on Twitter at UCA Grad Support. I try to post things that are mental health related. That's certainly my interest, but I just try to retweet and spread information about things that are happening on campus itself too. So if I see things happening in other departments, I try to get those out there as well. And then lastly, I want to brag on Dr. Barlow's podcast a little bit. Fred Chats with Dr. B, and you can find that anywhere where you get podcasts. But I've covered a lot of things tonight. I go through it pretty quickly, and there's a lot of information on the screen. But I talked about the imposter phenomenon in great length a couple times on Dr. Barlow's podcast. So if you're interested in that, you can go and listen to those. And then we also did another one with graduate students from different years in their program. So year 1, year 2, year 3. So they had different perspectives on what that's like, their past experiences, their current experiences with the imposter phenomenon. Really insightful stuff. I encourage you to listen to that if you're interested in this. We also talked about burnout, which again, I talked about in the GA orientation. I think it's really crucial for graduate students. Dr. Barlow talked about networking. We did a gratitude podcast. Dr. Barlow talked with a dietetics student, I believe, about nutrition. And also she talked with various deans from different colleges within the graduate school. So you might be able to find your dean on the podcast and listen to get a better idea of what your dean is like, to just feel more connected to your particular college, and then listen to the other ones to feel more connected in general. And I know we have a lot more coming up on the schedule for this year, but this is what we've been working on and doing a lot of work there. So it's been exciting. I encourage everyone to go listen to those. And with that, Dr. Barlow, I don't have anything else. So if there's anything else you'd like to talk about, it's open to you.
All right. So at this point, we'll open it up for questions. And there's the Q&A feature. So if you go to Q&A, you should be able to put your questions in there. I will say, while we're waiting on some of those questions, that the podcast topics for this semester, let's see, I know we're doing some about writing at the graduate level and how that's different from writing at the undergraduate level. We also have one on being connected, especially if you're an online student and it's hard, you're not here to connect. So how do you connect? So that's a topic. And what else?
There's neurodiversity.
That's
podcast.
right. That's a really good one. I did that interview the other day. So that we've got one on neurodiversity and how that plays out in graduate school. And it seems like there's one more. Oh, you and I are doing one about these survey results, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It should be released anytime.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be a good season. So here's a question from a student. The question is, can you miss a semester? So in general, I mean, a student has the right to skip a semester or two. We don't recommend it because sometimes once you leave, it's hard to get back, but you can certainly do that. If you are withdrawing for the semester, you should fill out a withdrawal form. That form is on our website. If you think you are permanently withdrawing from your program, you can fill out that form as well. If you sit out one semester, then coming back will be really easy. You just go in the system and register. If you sit out a year, then you'll have to reapply and pay the application fee and go through that process again. And the danger then is that when you come back in, if the program has changed, you may be expected to meet those new requirements. So that's why it's important to just, in addition to like being mindful of timelines, it's important to try to stay in the program and keep plugging away at it and getting it done. If a course announced asynchronous dates, am I safe to conclude that I am not expected to be present? If the course has pre-announced synchronous dates as well. I would say, so the question is basically around like asynchronous dates and synchronous dates in an online course. I would encourage you to ask your instructor. So I suspect that they have some clear ideas in their mind about the expectations for meeting the class. And so rather than me try to answer that, you should be asking that faculty member. You can send them an email and they'll reply. Let's see. So here's a question. I'm registered for 2 classes this semester plus a full-time job. If I find it's too much, can I drop a class? Will I get a refund? So, and we have another question about the refund policy with withdrawals. So if you look on, I think on the registrar's web page, and you'll see there, it's really kind of convoluted in some ways, but they have like the whole academic calendar, and it'll tell you like, this is the drop date to get 100% refund. This is the drop date to get 75%. This is the drop date with no refund. So all of those dates are on there. And then there is a date later in the semester that's the absolute last day to withdraw. So I'm not sure of what those dates are in between where you get either some of your refund, some of your tuition money refunded or all of it, but that information is available on the registrar's website. And if you can't find it, you can those are things that like John Scott can help you with. When you don't know where to go to get your answer, you can email him at gradsupport@uca.edu and he'll find that answer for you and point you in the right direction. Let's see what else we've got. So this next question is about doing 2 master's degrees at the same time in the same department. So we don't allow students to pursue 2 degrees at the same time in general. The only exception to that is if you're in, for example, a graduate certificate program, and I'm holding my hands for some reason like this, because that certificate program that has like 12 hours in it, where all 12 of those hours are embedded within the larger master's degree. If that's the case, where all of the graduate certificate are part of the master's program, then you can be doing those at the same time. But outside of that, we don't allow students to pursue 2 degrees at the same time. The other thing you have to be mindful of, and I was asked this question last night as well, is that the question was, could a student complete 2 tracks in the same degree? And that's a no-go as well. So you complete a degree, if the degree is 30 hours, you do 30 hours for that degree. For whatever track you have, you're done, you get that degree. You cannot come back and then do the degree again for the second track, because we can't award the same degree to the same person twice. Okay. So again, you do 1 degree, 1 track in that degree, and then you're done with that one. Okay. Let's see. If a graduate catalog changes for a degree, is it possible to change catalogs? Okay, so so just a little bit of background to make sure everyone's understanding the context of the question. When you enter graduate study, then the catalog year that you start with, that's your catalog year. And that determines what you see when you look in DegreeWorks. So if you start right now, you're in the 2022-2023 catalog. Well, let's suppose that you've been at this and then next year there's some program change and the catalog for 23-24 is different. Now, as the student who started in the 22-23 catalog, that's your degree plan. You don't have to change that. But if for some reason it was advantageous to change to the new one, you can certainly do that, okay? If you do that, you have to meet all the requirements for the new catalog. So you can't mix and match. So you're either in one or you're in the other, okay? You can't go backwards, right? So if you're starting right now in 2022, you can't say, ooh, I like the 2020 catalog for my program. You can't go backwards because you weren't here in that year and you didn't complete any classes in that under that catalog. But yes, you can go forward, you can make that change to move to a newer one if you like. To do that, you would talk to your advisor, and then there's a form that your advisor would submit, or maybe you sign off on it as well. But yeah, it starts with a conversation with your advisor, which notifies us at the graduate school, so that when you log into DegreeWorks, you're looking at the right degree requirements. Excellent questions. All good questions. Do we have any others floating around out there? I will say that, like I said a moment ago, questions that pop up in your head later, you're always welcome to email me. John Scott is also there. And see, here's the advantage John Scott is. One, he's youthful. So he thinks like you all. He's one of you. He's a graduate student, so he has a perspective that's different from me, and so he can provide you with advice, point you in the right direction, help you to find resources, etc. He is a conversationalist if you want to have a conversation, etc. One thing that we didn't mention is the counseling center. John Scott, do you want to take a moment just to give a plug, a shout out for UCA's
Sure.
Student Counseling Center and what services they offer?
Sure. Yeah. I was at the UCA Counseling Center last fall, so I'm a little biased, but they really do great work over there. There are a lot of counselors, and there are a few psychologists over there as well, who are always willing to take on new people. They really go out of their way to fit students into their schedules. I will say that it gets filled up pretty quickly. So if that's something you're interested in, I encourage you to go on their website. I don't remember exactly what the website is, but if you search for the UCA Counseling Center, it should pop up pretty quickly. They do usually do some groups of some sort throughout the semester as well. I forgot to mention this last night, but they really try to do things to get students engaged. And they're also, like, they try to be involved with different fairs and things that happen on campus. But again, if you are interested in that, I encourage you to go and either you can send an application through their website. If you just have questions, you can send emails over there, and they'd be happy to help you out. But they really are a great resource.
Okay. Thank you, John Scott. And thank all of you for joining us this evening. We've gone over our time. It's right after 8 o'clock. So I think that's a good session. I hope you all have a wonderful, wonderful semester. I look forward to seeing you crossing the stage soon and receiving your degree. And in between now and then, if there's anything that I can do or anything that John Scott can do, please reach out to us. And here's to a successful fall semester. Enjoy it. Bye-bye.
Everyone.